things that are regarded as female privilege but are not actually a privilege. Women in groups get easier access into bars and nightclubs. So men seem to think that it's female privilege that some club bouncers let friend groups of women into clubs without paying or giving them a discount, and friend groups made up of just men don't get that treatment. The reason that's not actually a privilege is because those types of nightclubs or parties intentionally try to get more women into their spaces to have them around as eye candy or to give the men there more options. It's just objectification, so it's not actually in the women's best interests. It's just a method for men to draw more women in and potentially prey on them. This is not a rare form of female privilege. It is because the women receiving that treatment are the product that is on sale. The bars are advertising to men that there will be a lot of women there who will be drunk. No opposite-sex-attracted man wants to go to a bar that's a sausage fest, so bars know that letting women get intoxicated for free, making them vulnerable and providing incentive for women to come, makes male-paying customers come in. This is also why they're allowing teenage girls in with obviously fake IDs. They know they are underage girls, they just don't care about their safety. If they could advertise they have underage drunk girls there, they would. Just stay home or go to an all-women's party. I hear those are really fun. Women often get free drinks. First off, this mainly only happens to women who men find really attractive. So most women who don't fit conventional beauty standards don't get free drinks. Second, the reason these women get free drinks is because the men who are buying it for them expect something in return, whether it's a date or to hook up with her. And worst case scenario, women get free drinks because it's often laced with substances that instantly puts them to sleep so that men can take advantage of them. Men always pay for dates and pay all the bills in relationships first off. That's not even true. Most relationships today are 50-50. In a lot of heterosexual relationships, women even spend more money on their male partners. Second, it was men who made up the patriarchal system of being the breadwinner of the relationship and the home. Because I don't know if you're aware of this, but women weren't always allowed to work or open a bank account or own a credit card. Many women today still can't do any of those things because men took those rights away and feminists fought for us to have those rights. So men were the sole providers, especially in the 1800s and 1900s. So for most women, our grandmothers told our mothers to depend on men financially, and our mothers told us, because that's what they were taught. Even today, with the gender pay gap, it's easier for men to earn more money, and many of them want to pay all the bills because to them, it's seen as more masculine. Female-only public transport and parking lots reserved for women. This is not a privilege because we literally need this for our safety. Women can't go out in public without being assaulted by men on trains, unalived by men in buses, or even set on fire by men while asleep on a subway. In Germany, women-only parking spaces were introduced in some areas as a safety measure, particularly after concerns arose about safety in parking garages. The designated spots are generally located in well-lit areas near entrances, aimed at reducing the risks for women in more isolated areas. Statistics show that around 7% of violent crimes against women occur in parking garages, which has fueled the support for such initiatives. Women-only spaces are intended to enhance safety, so anyone who gets offended by them or thinks it's a privilege is ignorant. Women can wear masculine clothes without criticism, while men can't wear feminine clothes without being mocked. Men say that as if drag isn't a whole multi-million-dollar industry. And no, actually, if you've ever listened to the experiences of butch and stud lesbians, you'd know that women who dress masculine are treated terribly, especially in conservative countries. And even when they're not, the reason women wearing masculine or gender-neutral clothes is treated as socially acceptable and men wearing feminine clothes aren't, isn't female privilege. It's actually because of misogyny. Here's a video that explains this.
Girls can wear jeans and cut their hair short, wear shirts and boots, because it's okay to be a boy. But for a boy to look like a girl is degrading, because you think that being a girl is degrading.
A lot of people treat the male gender as the default. Gender-neutral things, if you think about it, are just men's things. Why are suits unisex but not dresses? Superhero movies and video games are for everyone. When girly films are banished to the chick flick corner, mothers always get custody of kids and not the father. Here are the real facts.
Men who abuse their wives and children are more likely to get custody. It sounds surprising, but the only thing more surprising than it being true is how much data we have to prove this. One study looked at 60 cases of disputed custody, and what they found was, despite the fact that men were only responsible for primary care about 13% of the time, 82% of those men were awarded sole custody. And that is despite the fact that number 6, 62% of them had physically abused their spouse, and number 9, 37% had attempted to kidnap the children and prevent their spouse from having access. And what's also interesting is that neither the 37 men who abused their spouses or the 22 who had attempted to kidnap their children faced any imprisonment, fine, or custodial punishment for their behavior. However, of the women, 80% were either fined, imprisoned, or faced custodial punishment. And intimate partner violence is a common occurrence. It occurs in 25 to 50% of all disputed custody cases. And in households that have intimate partner violence, there is a 2 to 4 times greater risk of child abuse or child neglect. Another study looked at disputed cases where there was allegations of child abuse and the initial custody decision was then later overturned. And what they found is that in 60% of the cases, mothers lost complete custody to the abuser. And this is despite the fact that over 90% of that abuse was reported to CPS and that 88% of children complained of ongoing abuse after the custody decision. And that it was only on later appeal or collection of evidence that those decisions were overturned, and 88% of women then regained sole custody, with the remaining 11% allowed a joint custody schedule as much as the child wanted to visit with their abuser. And it's great those decisions got overturned, but they are the exception. Women are frequently told not to pursue allegations of abuse and to drop the matter lest they face further punishment. A Californian study of over 157 cases where child abuse was alleged, 2/3 were told not to talk about the abuse. And despite the fact that 87% of them had custody at the time of separation, once the court proceedings were done, only 31% still had custody. Over 60% then stopped reporting the abuse because they feared they would lose visitation. And that's despite the fact that 70% of the kids reported the abuse was ongoing.
And even if court systems did favor mothers in child custody, that would be something men brought on themselves with the sexist gender roles they push. You can't act like women are inherently suited for childcare and should focus on being a stay-at-home mom and then turn around and get mad about women being prioritized in custody. This is a system of misogyny upheld by men. Men are the ones who decided that women exist to birth children and care for children. You don't get to then blame these women for the laws based on a culture of misogyny that you men create and perpetuate. And most times, the father isn't even interested in having full custody of the kids. In just over 51% of custody decisions, both parents agree that the mother should become the custodial parent. And when the father does want full custody, it's usually just to spite the mother. Mothers spend more time with their kids than fathers, both when married and divorced. Women aren't usually drafted into the military while men are forced to go to war. Who usually wages war? Men. Who overwhelmingly joins the military on a voluntary basis. When there is no draft? Men. Is the culture in the military open to women? No. Female soldiers constantly get assaulted and harassed by male soldiers. There is plenty of stories from women who did join the military and faced constant sexual harassment and sexual abuse.
Men are more oppressed than women.
So your only evidence to prove that men are more oppressed than women is that men have to go to war? That's really bold of you to bring up the fact that men have to go to war as evidence in your bucket, as if that gender role was not created by men. Then in order to duck the argument when she said that it was because of the patriarchy, you immediately run to, oh, the patriarchy doesn't exist. And then you start talking about World War I and II, as if Russia, for example, wasn't deploying female troops during World War I, and the United States also had women troops fighting in World War II alongside Russia and countless other countries. Yes, there were more men fighting in the military than women, but again, the people that created that gender role for men that men hate so much were men. And even if I grant you that point, that still doesn't erase the fact that women have been oppressed for a very long time. They haven't even been able to work for 100 years, and it's only been a little over 100 years since they were allowed to vote. Not to mention that it took into the late 19th century and into the early 20th century for women to not be considered property anymore. They weren't allowed to own their own property until 1900, and they weren't allowed to divorce their husbands until 1969, and only California did it in 1969. It took longer for other states to consider that even an option. Not to mention, women are much more likely to be victims of SA since a very young age than men. And not only that, men are majority committing violent partner crime against women. So how do you ignore all of these points just to jump to, oh, men are more oppressed than women?
Men systemically essay women during war times. Military is a men's club because men made it so. It doesn't even matter that men are drafted into the military more than women, cause in many wars, women still suffer the most. Civilian deaths often outnumber military casualties, especially when both sides possess significant firepower. For example, during World War II, while military casualties were high, civilian deaths were estimated to be over 38 million, significantly exceeding the military death. Women always have it way worse during times of war. Women and children get saved first in times of crisis.
This is actually the best example of ambivalent sexism I could possibly think of. Why would people try to save women first in a disaster like the Titanic only to not believe their account of what actually happened during the sinking? I literally love this so much. I'm a psychology doctoral candidate and I study gender dynamics. Lots of my work draws from ambivalent sexism theory to understand men's hostility toward women. Ambivalent sexism theory is a very well-regarded framework in social psychology, which has been demonstrated and holds up across cultures and across times, which basically says that there are two types of sexism, hostile and benevolent. And these two forms of sexism work together to maintain men's status over women. Hostile sexism is what you typically think of when you think of prejudice against women. Overtly negative, hostile attitudes toward them. The idea that women are incompetent. Maybe the idea that they genuinely don't know what they saw when they saw the Titanic sinking in half. But then there's another more sneaky type of sexism. Benevolent sexism. It's sneaky because it seems positive on the surface but actually reinforces ideas that women need men's help to survive. Ideas like women need to be protected by men. And actually when we measure this on the ambivalent sexism inventory, one of the items asks about women being rescued first in disasters, such as in the Titanic sinking. And it's argued that these two forms of sexism need to coexist because if men were just overtly hostile to women, we would never want to have heterosexual intimacy with them, we would never want to be in relationships with them. And from an evolutionary perspective, men would not be able to fulfill their evolutionary drive to procreate with us because we wouldn't grant them access to us. So they have to offset the overt hostility by pretending to be nice to us in ways that just disguises the sexism. Like giving women the lifeboats first only to then disregard their accounts of what happened. I love social psychology in action.